you know, based on ultrasound, if the baby is going to have dwarfism.
Yeah,
okay.
like third trimester, like late.
Oh, you don't know till the third trimester.
Which also was kind of fun because all my girlfriends, like, when they had babies, their last scan would be at 20 weeks, where we got to like go until 30, 40 weeks to like, you know, track the baby. But we got all.
We knew, like we knew before the doctors told us though. Like,
really?
Yeah, I know what this
Our
looks
doctor
like.
was like, especially with Jackson, she was a little nervous, I think, to tell us, because you never know like how a parent is going to react to their child having some diagnosis.
I'm like, I saw the nose,
we saw
I saw the
like,
forehead, like,
and like she comes in with this piece of paper and there's like red all over it, and she like sits down and kind of takes a deep breath, and I think we said it before her. We're like, okay, so he has dwarfism.
Yeah.
And like, you could just tell she was like, yeah. He does. Okay, we're good.
By Josiah, they were telling us like the second week.
Like, was that a question? Like, obviously, everyone, the question always like, do you want a boy or a girl? Like, it's like, which one do you want? Like, was that a question for you guys? It's like, do you want a child that has dwarfism or not with dwarfism? Were people asking you guys that question?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think it would be rather bizarre for us to go, oh yeah, we really hope our kid has dwarfism and is different from the rest. Like, I feel like that was always such a weird question, because who would say that? Like, who
100%. That's where it gets kind of tough. Like, the question, like,
maybe it was your dwarf army comment that they were like, maybe he does.
Asking him. Yeah.
No, we love our kids. We love our kids, but it's not like I would not like I would not choose that for my kids. There is a lot of suffering. There's a lot of mental, you know, toughness that needs to happen. There's a lot of medical complications that come from it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but it's tough to say that. And when I say this, people will say like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you. But it's like, no, reality is like, yeah, I would not wish dwarfism on my kids necessarily. I wouldn't, like, no one would pick dwarfism over average height. You know what I'm saying? Like, people might say they will. No, because they know it's not actually possible. It's not possible for me to actually redo my, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, a genie is not right here.
You're like, it's not an option.
So they'll say for their own security, but it's like, no, like, there is a lot of things that can happen, you know?
And I think that's where, like, you know, something that we've talked a lot about lately, you know, is the question of like, why would you bring kids into the world? So why would you have kids anyway if they were going to be different and have disability?
Okay.
And,
when you know that you could have someone with dwarfism.
And I think that, like, as much as we would never wish that upon someone, that does not mean that your child cannot live a fulfilled life just because they have
and be super
dwarfism.
Inspiring and like be happy and all these things. So it is like this conflict. It's kind of back.
But
to
it's like the same as like you asked a parent like, oh, do you want your kid to be born with 4 fingers or 5 fingers? Like, their life is still probably going to be pretty fulfilled if they have 4 fingers on one hand.
But no one's going to say 4
fingers. But, like, no one's going to, like, say, oh, I really hope my kid only has 4 fingers. You know, like, just,
that's a really good way of putting it.
And you mentioned surgeries. Are there certain surgeries that people with dwarfism have to get more predominantly, I guess, than someone who doesn't?
Oh, yeah.
100%. Like, Zachary has a shunt. He has hydrocephalus.
So average heights have shunts, but like if you go to here's my example. If you go to an LPA conference and go to like the pool or whatever, so tubes in your ears, like lots of people have tubes. You know, 50% of 100 people in a pool at an LPA conference probably have earplugs in their ears. You know what I'm saying a little bit? Like 50% of 100 people with dwarfism have tubes in their ears, so they need earplugs. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like.
Why tubes in your ears? What is that?
The water doesn't drain. The way our skeletal makeup is, water does not drain correctly, and so it sits there. And so the idea is, if water's not draining, your hearing is really bad. If your hearing is bad, you might not develop speech the same, or you
also get like ear infections and like other complications.
That's one thing we're battling right now. Is I had tubes. I do not want our kids to have tubes, but they go through these episodes where they literally cannot hear because they have water in their ears. But it's like, tubes are permanent. Tubes affect the eardrum. You can still get ear infections with tubes. And there's data now that maybe it didn't affect the speech of people that didn't get tubes. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's our data, though. You can't put that on the internet.
Well, I'm just saying.
That's our own, like.
I'm observing that, like, yes, people that, you know, didn't get the tube, it didn't really affect anyone the same way they thought. You know what I'm saying? And so we're kind of battling that a little bit, like, in our heads.
But there's other complications with, like our son has pretty bowed legs. There can be, like, issues with spine.
Lila will probably need, so out of 3 kids, 2 of them already probably need leg surgery. And adenoids and tonsils are a big one. Are their breathing? We're mouth breathers. I always say, like, if you go into our room, like, we're in a hotel room and our 3 kids are sleeping, if your kid sounded like that, you'd
probably call someone.
You would call 911. They're suffocating. You would call 911 on the spot. Like,
they no, it's
just our
snore.
There's snores.
There's a lot of drool. There's a lot.
And they like stop. They've all had sleep studies already. Like have your not have your kids had sleep studies, but you know what I'm saying.
That same, like,
how many of your friends'
average,
kids have had sleep studies? No one. Like all 3 of ours have already had sleep studies to see if there was something wrong.
But we're also very blessed within the community, because like there are some, and I think that when we first got together, and like I went to, they have like the World Dwarf Games every year, and we went to in Michigan, and I saw some things there that were really scary with kids, like medical issues that it terrified me, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I can do this. Like I don't know if I can follow this path of motherhood, because that's all I really wanted, was to be a mom and to have a family, and that was really scary. But then
Tori married me, or fell in love with me, but then that concept, she did not see me as someone with dwarfism. I love Zach, but then once you do get married, the concept of like, wait a minute, these kids, I have kids with this guy, right? Like that thought came a little later, and that was 100%. Scary,
and that was hard to like grapple and like really decide if that's what I wanted for my life. And I think with him, because he has a shunt, and that's like the scariest thing to me, because it's his brain, and he has something in his body and that like he's solely dependent on, otherwise he will die. And that was like, hold on, like, can that be hereditary? Like, can my kids get that? Like, I don't know if I can deal with that. And
you did not say that at our first date.
I didn't get
oh my gosh. First date, you're cracking out the medical questions?
No, I didn't. And
then she's like,
I got married. And then I was like, oh, by the way, I have this shunt that like my body relies on. And just a year and a half ago, I had a malfunction.
You had to have surgery.
And a whole big thing. It's like,
brain surgery?
Yeah.
I forgot to tell her about the house, and I forgot to tell her about the shunt.
And the brain issue.
My mistake.
Wow.
I'm sorry. I'm so clueless. What exactly is a shunt? Is it different than the tubes in the ears?
Yes, it's different. Okay. Yeah, there's some reason there's fluid on your brain. The body develops fluid. It's a simple term.
Everyone has fluid on their brain.
But yours gets it down into the stomach and deposits. Mine, it clogs up and
it pools.
Hypothetically, will drown the brain without a passage that gets it out.
Oh my goodness!
So it applies a ton of pressure. So when he had to have surgery a year and a half ago, the shunt had malfunctioned, so the drainage had malfunctioned, and fluid was just building up in his head.
How did you know?
It's pretty intense.
I had migraines for a long time, but then eventually
it got to a point where he was
I was having a migraine every week, and then you go to the hospital, you getting sick, and when they finally got me in, my heart rate went down to like, I don't know, I'm pumped with morphine. I'm like, I'm still in a lot of pain. And then they finally saw it. It was difficult to see because it was all scarred up or whatever. But then they did the transfer, and I was like, all right, let's go.
Scary. A year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So you had like a 6-month-old.
Yeah, I did.
Oh my God.
Thank you for
I'm
pointing
like
that
doing
out.
the math. I'm like thinking like
I feel like every stage we've had a baby, like literally every time we've had a birth, something would happen with him.
I had to leave the hospital
illness.
when we had Josiah because I had this massive migraine.
And now that we know, it was his.
And I had these migraines for a long time, and we just thought it was maybe stress induced, or we literally ended up chalking it up just to like stress or whatever.
Like all the doctors, like, oh, you just had a newborn. That's probably what it is. And I was always like, no, this is something else. This is not. I'd been.
Finally, we went to Salmon Creek twice, and they sent me home. Finally, we went to like OHSU, which is the big hospital in Oregon, and they're like, your shunt's broken. Like, you need.
Thank goodness they figured it out.
So I haven't had a migraine since then, which kind of makes me mad because it's been
10 years.
10 years
10
of
years.
like.
Oh my gosh!
And now I look back at it too. Like every time we flew Disneyland. Every time we flew,
that trip that we saw you guys, one day he was in the room all by like.
I would just tell Tori, hey, I need to sit for a minute. There's I have a headache or whatever.
Oh my gosh!
But now I've flown multiple times, and I'm like, oh my gosh, was it the shunt for 10 years? Like
to live without that pain finally.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Wow. It was annoying. But anyway. I don't know how we got
on that topic.
I'm curious talking about having newborns and stuff. I'm just curious. I've been wondering if pregnancy with a baby with dwarfism, is it different, or is pregnancy and delivery about the same?
So yes and no. Like a lot of women or families don't know that their child has dwarfism until after they've given birth.
Okay.
Because it's not something that their OB or doctor is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
So
there's also different types of dwarfism that aren't as obvious.
like achondroplasia is not as obvious in the womb, like until the 3rd trimester. And so if you're not looking for it, it's definitely, there can be complications with birth because their head is so big. So sometimes they'll end up in an emergency C-section or not be able to have a vaginal birth. But other than that, like, I don't know. I'm like convinced, and this is not scientific. This is just my own. Like, I've had 3 kids, and they all had dwarfism, and this is like comparing to my girlfriends who had kids. They have this number of like your amniotic fluid, like how much fluid is normal for pregnancy, and it's like 12 to something is normal, and I had almost triple the number of normal. And so I'm like kind of convinced that like your body knows something is going on and something is different, and so it produces extra like cushion.
Well, triple's quite a bit more.
I was huge. Like I got huge during my pregnancy. I'm like, this is so unfair, and that's what it
like,
was.
Are the babies
fluid.
Smaller?
No.
Oh,
My
okay.
kids were 9-pound babies. Like they were huge.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Well, and our first kid, like they kind of called it. Jackson, in my 3rd trimester, said he had dwarfism, and he was born, and they had to call someone in to like, does he actually have dwarfism?
Oh,
because our kids, like their features are a little less prominent than some babies. So no,
as a
they're
baby,
like
it's
normal.
the head. It's the head. Everything else looks pretty normal. You know, so
Wow.
And they have this thing called, I don't know what they call it, starfish hands. So like when he puts his hand
like
together,
raise your hand up. Yeah.
like
See,
your fingers touch.
like this is not just me. This is like anyone
That's
with
like
dwarf.
that's
if
like
you
a
ever see someone with
distinct-
achondroplasia, I should say.
Yeah, that's true.
Do that and they'll have
That's like
that
a
split.
feature. So that's how they found it on our son, was like his fingers did not touch.
You're
Like,
Wait, okay, hold
Wait,
up. You
go-
just said achondroplasia.
Sorry,
Is that the like the medical official?
I'm an
It's a
achondroplasia. I'm an achondroplasia. I have achondroplasia dwarfism. People with dwarfism.
There's thousands of different kinds
Peter
of
Dinklage is an achondroplasia dwarf. Marty Kleba from the Pirates of the Caribbean, different type of dwarfism. I forgot his type of dwarfism, but so there's like
And
my
like his dad
dystrophic
has-
dwarfism. But achondroplasia, there's hypochondroplasia, which is a type
so
of
many.
achondroplasia, but there's a little bit taller in the torso. Achondroplasia is basically if you and I sat side by side or sat together, our heads, we're standing up. You're 2 feet taller than me, but sitting down, it would seem like we're the same. You know what I'm saying? So our torso is similar. It's just our legs and our arms are affected. And there's other types of dwarfism where like the torso is affected. Things like that.
Interesting.
So.